Pemberley Corp, the DNA Deception. Jarmo Palamaki. Chapter 1. It was a typical Monday morning at the Pemberley Corp headquarters, with the sound of keyboards clacking and the occasional hum of the coffee machine filling the air. Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy, the president and owner of the company, sat in his spacious office, sipping his coffee and staring at the sleek, silver computer screen in front of him. He was a man known for his sharp mind and impeccable taste, and his company was a testament to his success in the field of technical research. With a slight nod to himself, Mr. Darcy asked his computer to connect to Miss Elizabeth Bennet, a manager who had been making waves in the company with her innovative ideas and exceptional leadership skills. The screen flickered to life, and soon the image of Miss Bennet appeared, her bright eyes and warm smile filling the room. "Good morning, Miss Bennet," Mr. Darcy said, his deep voice firm and authoritative. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Not at all, Mr. Darcy," Miss Bennet replied, her voice crisp and professional. "I'm happy to take your call. What can I do for you?" Mr. Darcy leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers together as he began to speak. "I've been hearing excellent reports about your work, Miss Bennet. Your department has been consistently delivering high-quality results, and your team seems to thrive under your leadership. I must say, I'm impressed." Miss Bennet's cheeks flushed a delicate pink, but she maintained her composure, her eyes sparkling with interest. "Thank you, Mr. Darcy. I'm proud of what we've accomplished, and I couldn't have done it without my team's hard work and dedication." Mr. Darcy nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "I've been considering your career trajectory, Miss Bennet, and I'm pleased to inform you that I've decided to promote you to the position of Vice President, effective immediately." Miss Bennet's eyes widened in surprise, and she leaned forward, her hands clasped together in excitement. "Oh, Mr. Darcy, I don't know what to say. This is an incredible honor, and I'm truly grateful for the opportunity." Mr. Darcy's smile grew wider, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You deserve it, Miss Bennet. My board of directors has been recommending you for this position for some time now, and I'm pleased to say that I concur with their assessment. You have a keen mind and a natural talent for leadership, and I have no doubt that you'll excel in this new role." As they discussed the details of her promotion, Miss Bennet's enthusiasm was palpable, even through the screen. Mr. Darcy found himself drawn to her warmth and intelligence, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and satisfaction at having made the right decision. As the call came to a close, Mr. Darcy stood up, his tall frame towering over the desk. "I look forward to seeing you at the executive meeting tomorrow, Miss Bennet. Congratulations again on your promotion. You have a bright future ahead of you at Pemberley Corp." Miss Bennet's face glowed with happiness as she replied, "Thank you, Mr. Darcy. I won't let you down." The screen flickered off, and Mr. Darcy was left standing alone in his office, a sense of anticipation building in his chest. He had a feeling that this was just the beginning of a new and exciting chapter in the history of Pemberley Corp, with Miss Elizabeth Bennet by his side as his new vice president. Chapter 2. The glass walls of the executive conference room caught the late afternoon sun in a way that made the polished marble table look like a slab of white ice. A low hum of air conditioning filled the space, punctuated by the occasional rustle of a leather folder or the soft click of a laptop's power button. At the head of the table stood Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy, president of Pemberley Corp. He exuded a calm authority that made the room fall silent as his boots clicked on the marble floor. He cleared his throat, his voice low and resonant, each syllable measured. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his eyes sweeping the room, "it is my distinct pleasure to introduce the newest member of our executive team, Miss Elizabeth Bennet, who will be serving as our Vice President of Strategic Initiatives." A ripple of polite applause followed. Elizabeth stood, almost impossibly composed, her dark hair arranged in a sleek chignon, a simple navy blazer over a crisp white blouse. She offered a modest smile, a flash of intelligence in her eyes that seemed to catalog the room in a single glance. "Thank you, Mr. Darcy," she said, her voice warm yet precise. I am honored to join Pemberley executive team at such an exciting juncture. I look forward to working with each of you to drive forward our vision of science for a better tomorrow." Mr. Darcy nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. And I could think of no better partner than Miss Bennet to help steer this new chapter for Pemberley. He paused, his gaze settling on a screen that flickered to life behind him, displaying the sleek logo of a small but rapidly rising biotechnology firm, Helix Innovations. "2 weeks ago, our board approved the acquisition of Helix Innovations," Darcy announced, his tone shifting to one of measured enthusiasm. "Helix has pioneered a series of breakthroughs in targeted gene editing techniques. Specifically, their CRISPR-X platform has demonstrated unprecedented specificity in editing the BRCA1 gene without off-target effects. Their recent publication in Nature Biotechnology reports a 96% success rate in correcting pathogenic mutations in vitro, a result that, if replicated in vivo, could redefine the therapeutic landscape for hereditary cancers." A murmur of interest rose around the table. Mr. Thorpe leaned forward, his eyebrows raised. "That's remarkable," he said, "but I have heard that Helix's research has been accused to be close to the limits of moral principles." Darcy's expression remained composed, but his eyes sparkled with a quiet confidence. "Indeed, that is precisely why I have asked Miss Bennet to accompany me tomorrow to Helix headquarters in Cambridge. We will meet with Dr. Alden Whitmore, the Chief Scientific Officer, who knows everything about that." Elizabeth lifted her chin ever so slightly, a glint of curiosity dancing in her eyes. "I look forward to seeing the lab environment and understanding how Helix's culture meshes with Pemberley's, and I know that I will have some clear views about the moral issues as well." The room fell silent for a heartbeat. Then Mr. Thorpe spoke again, his tone buoyant. "Well, it sounds like a daring venture. I'm confident the synergy will be excellent. Our shareholders will be delighted." Darcy nodded. "I shall be brief on tomorrow's itinerary," he continued. "My purpose in visiting that company is to form an extensive view of its research and possible applications of interest. However, I am desperately in need to have complementary views that I trust Miss Bennet is able to provide." He turned his gaze back to Elizabeth, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift that seemed to convey both respect and perhaps something more unspoken. "Miss Bennet, I trust you will find the visit both illuminating and, I hope, inspiring." She inclined her head, her smile widening, just enough to bridge the professional distance. "I appreciate the confidence you have placed in me, Mr. Darcy. I assure you I shall give the matter my full attention." The meeting adjourned, and the executive team filtered out of the glass-walled chamber, each carrying their own thoughts about the acquisition, the future of Pemberley, and the enigmatic new vice president who seemed to command attention as effortlessly as a tide. Chapter 3. As the helicopter soared through the sky, the cityscape unfolding below, Miss Elizabeth Bennet turned to Mr. Darcy with a curious expression. The vice president of Pemberley Corp had been pondering the executive meeting from the previous day, and a particular phrase had been nagging at her. "Mr. Darcy, I couldn't help but notice your comment about complementary views during the meeting," Elizabeth said, her voice clear and confident. "Could you elaborate on what you meant by that?" Mr. Darcy, the company president, gazed out the window for a moment before responding. His eyes, piercing and intense, met Elizabeth's as he began to speak. "I was referring to the diverse perspectives that our team brings to the table, Miss Bennet. In particular, I was thinking of your own unique background and how it might inform our decision-making process." Elizabeth's eyes narrowed slightly, sensing that there was more to the story. "And what about Mr. Thorpe's comment about being close to the limits of moral principles? What did he mean by that?" "Mr." Darcy's expression turned serious, his jaw setting in a firm line. "Some of the board members have expressed concerns about your religious background, Miss Bennet. They worry that it may influence your judgment in certain matters." Elizabeth's eyebrows rose, a hint of surprise and irritation flashing across her face. "And what is your opinion on the matter, Mr. Darcy?" she asked, her tone measured. The president's gaze locked onto hers, his eyes gleaming with a hint of appreciation. "I must admit, Miss Bennet, that I find your independence and strong convictions to be a refreshing change. I'm tired of working with people who simply agree with me in order to curry favor. I value your judgment and believe that your perspectives will be invaluable in our upcoming discussions with Helix Innovations. The helicopter began its descent, and Elizabeth's thoughts turned to the company they were about to visit. Helix Innovations was a cutting-edge research facility that had been making waves in the scientific community with its groundbreaking work on modifying human DNA. As they touched down on the helipad, Elizabeth felt a shiver run down her spine. She knew that the research being conducted at Helix Innovations raised complex ethical questions, and it was their job to determine whether the company's work aligned with society's moral standards. As they stepped out of the helicopter, Mr. Darcy turned to her and said, "I must warn you, Miss Bennet, the research we are about to review is provocative. It challenges our understanding of what it means to be human and pushes the boundaries of what is considered acceptable. But I have every confidence that together we can navigate these complex issues and make informed decisions that will shape the future of our company and our world." Elizabeth nodded, her mind racing with the implications. She was ready to face the challenges ahead, armed with her sharp intellect and her unwavering commitment to doing what was right. As they walked towards the Helix Innovations facility, she felt a sense of excitement and trepidation, knowing that the decisions they made would have far-reaching consequences for humanity. Chapter 4. The glass front of Helix Innovations headquarters caught the late afternoon sun and threw shards of amber across the polished mahogany floor of the executive wing. Inside, the air hummed with a quiet, purposeful energy. Servers whispered data, a soft cascade of filtered air kept the climate perfect, and a faint, ever-present scent of antiseptic mingled with the faint ozone of static electricity. It was here in the heart of what had once been a modest biotech startup that Dr. Alden Whitmore, Chief Scientific Officer, waited for his most important visitors yet. Dr. Whitmore was a man of measured composure. In his early 50s, his hair had gone silver at the temples, but the sharpness of his eyes, steel blue and perpetually scanning, still betrayed the curiosity of a man who had, a decade prior, re-engineered the very definition of mortality. He wore a crisp charcoal suit, the kind that whispered of an old-world elegance, but his tie, a sleek, dark green line, betrayed his fondness for the organic, the living. In his hand, he held a tablet displaying the latest genomic sequencing results, the green-blue graphs dancing across the screen like a living tapestry. He glanced at the sleek, digital clock on the wall. 3:08 p.m., the elevator had just opened, and two figures stepped out onto the marble landing, their silhouettes framed by the rising light. Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy, president of Pemberley Corp, entered first. He was a man whose reputation preceded him, a tall, lean figure with a jaw set as firmly as any ironclad contract. Dressed in a tailored suit of midnight blue that seemed to absorb the light, he carried an aura of unyielding control. His dark hair was neatly styled, and his eyes, gray like storm clouds, scanned the office with the same precision with which he had overseen countless mergers and acquisitions. Beside him, Miss Elizabeth Bennet, vice president of Pemberley's Emerging Technologies Division, followed. She was younger, with a quick, luminous smile that seemed to soften the steel in her colleague's presence. Her auburn hair was loosely braided, and she wore a crisp white blouse under a navy-sheath dress, her posture confident yet relaxed. They paused at the threshold of Dr. Whitmore's office, where a sleek crystal table held a vase of white orchids, their petals immaculate, reminiscent of sterile lab slides. The doctor rose to greet them, his smile warm but measured. "Mr. Darcy, Miss Bennet, welcome to Helix. Please, have a seat," he said, gesturing toward the high-back leather chairs that faced his own. Darcy took the chair opposite Whitmore, his hands clasped, the faint sound of his cufflinks clicking against the polished wood. Bennet settled into the adjacent seat, her eyes flickering over the holographic displays that floated above the table, schematic representations of double helixes intertwining with strands of reptilian DNA. "Dr. Whitmore," Darcy began, his voice low and resonant, "thank you for receiving us on such short notice. As you are aware, Pemberley Corp has finalized the acquisition of Helix Innovations. The board is eager to understand the full scope of your research, particularly the work you have done on human genomic modification. Whitmore inclined his head, the faintest hint of a smile crossing his features. I'm delighted to discuss our progress. As you know, our primary objective has always been to extend human health span and resilience. In the last 12 months, we have successfully integrated segments of Anolis carolinensis, the green anole genomic material, into human embryonic stem cells. This has produced a phenotype we are calling Lacertian augmentation. Bennet leaned forward, her curiosity evident. Lacertian, so the lizard DNA isn't simply a placeholder? What functional traits does it confer? A very pertinent question, Whitmore replied, tapping his tablet. The holographic display shifted, zooming into a colored strand of DNA. We identified 3 key gene clusters in the animal genome, one governing rapid cellular repair, another enhancing metabolic efficiency, and a third providing innate resistance to a broad spectrum of pathogens, including many viral families that currently evade human immune response. By selectively splicing these loci into the human genome, we have achieved 3 measurable outcomes. He tapped a graph, and a red line rose sharply, representing disease incidence in a sample population of modified subjects. First, a statistically significant reduction, over 90%, in susceptibility to viral infections, including influenza, coronaviruses, and even emergent RNA viruses. Second, enhanced mitochondrial turnover, resulting in a 30% increase in cellular ATP efficiency. Finally, telomere maintenance pathways are upregulated, extending the average lifespan of the cohort from 78 years to an estimated 240 years, with a corresponding 30% reduction in age-related morbidity. The room fell silent for a heartbeat, the weight of the data hanging like a palpable force. Darcy's eyes narrowed, a mixture of admiration and calculation. Your results are remarkable. However, Pemberley's board has expressed concerns about the scalability and ethical implications. Specifically, they ask whether the integration of reptilian DNA could produce unintended phenotypic changes, perhaps physiological or psychological, beyond the intended health benefits. Whitmore exhaled slowly, his expression shifting from confident to thoughtful. We anticipated those concerns. Our trials have been exhaustive. Phenotypically, the subjects retain normal human morphology. There have been only some observable reptilian characteristics, scales, ectothermic temperature regulation, or altered sensory modalities. Psychologically, we have administered a battery of neurocognitive assessments. The subjects demonstrate average to above average cognition, no deviations in emotional regulation, and report a consistent sense of identity. The only subtle change noted is a slightly heightened circadian harmony, a more efficient alignment with natural light cycles, which we attribute to the anal's innate photoreceptive pathways. Bennet's eyes flickered. And the ethical frameworks? Have you consulted any bioethics panels? Indeed, Whitmore replied, pulling up a separate display. We engaged the International Bioethics Consortium, IBC, from the inception of this project. The IBC's final report, dated in June, provided a conditional approval contingent upon transparent informed consent, post-procedural monitoring for at least 2 generations, and a commitment to equitable access, not just elite deployment. We have also deposited the full dataset in the open access repository Genomics for Humanity, ensuring that any entity, public or private, can audit our methodology. A faint smile tugged at Darcy's lips. It appears you have covered all the bases. Pemberley's interest lies in bringing this technology to a broader market, but we must also consider the corporate responsibilities that accompany such a paradigm shift. The board wishes to discuss potential modifications to the research pipeline, particularly whether the integration of additional gene clusters could further enhance resilience, perhaps incorporating elements from other species known for longevity, such as the naked mole rat. Whitmore leaned back, his fingertips steepled. The modularity of the technique allows for additional inserts, yes. However, each new gene cluster necessitates a separate series of safety assays. The mole rat's hypoxia-tolerant pathways, for instance, could confer resistance to ischemic injury, but they also carry unique metabolic quirks that might interfere with the current Lacertian platform. We would need to establish a risk-benefit ratio. The conversation lingered in a delicate balance between scientific curiosity and corporate strategy. A silence settled, broken only by the low hum of the building's climate control. Darcy rose, the chair screeching softly against the marble floor. He extended his hand, his grip firm. "Dr. Whitmore, thank you. I look forward to a partnership that will redefine the boundaries of human potential." Whitmore shook his hand, his palm steady. "The future is indeed ours to shape, and we'll do it responsibly." Chapter 5, Dr. Whitmore, a man with the fervor of a prophet, gestured toward the projection. "Imagine," he began, his voice rich with conviction, "a world unshackled from the burdens of suffering, decay, and limitation. My team has already demonstrated the ability to eradicate hereditary diseases, to recalibrate immune systems to counter even the most virulent pathogens. We've decoded the blueprints of life, and with precision, we can rewrite them." Mr. Bennet, ever the pragmatist, frowned. "So you're saying humanity could simply edit away its ailments, even the common cold?" His skepticism was tinged with the suspicion of a man who had spent a lifetime navigating the unpredictable chaos of 5 daughters. "Precisely," Whitmore beamed, "but this is no mere eradication. Consider the possibilities of creation. We can design children with tailored traits, intellect, resilience, creativity. Imagine a society where every parent could ensure their child is free from suffering, equipped to thrive in any circumstance. Why should we leave such matters to chance?" Darcy, who had listened in silence, arched a brow. "And what of the soul, Dr. Whitmore? You offer a future where humans might be optimized, but does perfection stifle the essence of what it is to be human?" His voice carried the measured cadence of a man unaccustomed to doubt, yet unsettled by it. Whitmore waved a hand dismissively. "Why should we cling to flaws? If a parent could spare their child from poverty, from illness, from weakness, would you not call that an act of love? And this isn't just about people." He gestured to a second projection. Clusters of genetically engineered flora and fauna, mechanical yet organic in their design. "We're cultivating symbiotic life forms, creatures to till our fields, purify our oceans, even construct our cities. Soon humans will be freed from menial labor. Imagine a world where work is obsolete. A paradise where we may devote ourselves wholly to art, discovery, and, well, joy." Bennet folded his arms, his expression shadowed. "And who decides which traits are worthy, which abilities are special? You risk creating a world where those who reject your paradise or who cannot afford it are left in the dust. My younger sister, for instance," he shot a glance at Darcy, "was spirited, even headstrong. Would your science deem that a flaw to be corrected?" Darcy startled at the unexpected reference to his courtship of Elizabeth, but Whitmore merely laughed. "Mr. Bennet, you mistake me. The future I promise isn't tyranny, it's liberation choice. Of course, parents may choose modesty, kindness, or courage. Such virtues can be nurtured in the genome as readily as disease can be excised. The human spirit isn't a product of chance, but of design. We're merely giving nature a helping hand." The room fell quiet. Outside, the rain had ceased, and the sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light that seemed to mirror Whitmore's optimism. Darcy finally spoke, his tone measured. "If this world is truly one of liberty, then I suppose it is my place to consider the balance between progress and prudence, power and responsibility." Bennet scoffed softly. "And there's the rub. We'll see whether your paradise has room for the untamed and the unrefined. I've known too many bright minds who blinked away the simple joys of a bumbling child, a stubborn ox, or a field of weeds and wildflowers. If all is perfected, what's left to cherish?" But even as he spoke, Darcy was already envisioning a child with Elizabeth's vivacity, unmarred by the illnesses that had once plagued her younger sister. Whitmore's hologram still danced with infinite potential. Paradise, it seemed, was no longer a dream, but a choice. Chapter 6. "Mr. Darcy, Miss Bennet," Whitmore began, his voice a mix of pride and mischief. Shall we move to the sanctum where theory becomes flesh? He gestured to a security panel. As the door hissed open, the air shifted, cooler, tinged with the antiseptic bite of a place where life was sculpted. The first apartment was a cathedral of biology. Bioluminescent panels bathed rows of incubation tanks in an eerie blue. At the center stood a cluster of cribs, each cradling an infant that should not have existed. Their forms were undeniably human, ropey limbs, delicate fingers, but fused with the uncanny. Smooth, iridescent scales sheathed their skulls. Eyes like narrow slits, gold-flecked and ancient, blinked open at the intruders. One had a tail, thin and curling, flicking rhythmically like a metronome of another world. Mr. Darcy stepped back. These features, they're not just modified, they're archaic. His words hung in the air, weighted with the unspoken question, why? Whitmore beamed. Archaic or adaptive? Consider their thermoregulation, their resistance to pathogens. These aren't defects, they're upgrades. He reached toward a crib, letting his gloved fingers brush the cheek of a child whose skin rippled with a subtle reptilian gloss. The next stage of humanity. Miss Bennet's voice cut through the haze. They resemble nothing more than extraterrestrials. She stared at a child whose yawn revealed a flash of needle-like teeth. Present them as such, and the world might swallow the lie. Dr. Whitmore chuckled, a sound like skeleton keys turning in locks. Ah, yes, you've seen the prototypes of our interstellar cousins, no? The media would devour the spectacle. Alien orphan crisis, government cover-up, all while we prepare. His smile widened, revealing a gleam of danger beneath his confidence. Imagine the funding, the fear, the reverence. Distraction is the price of progress. Darcy's jaw tightened. And if the world sees through, Lily? For a heartbeat, Whitmore's facade cracked, a flicker of gloom in his eyes, like a predator imagining the hunt. Then they'll have no choice but to evolve, or be left behind. He turned to Miss Bennet, whose notebook lay closed, her expression unreadable. Miss Bennet, survival favors the bold. Don't you agree? Outside the crib, the infants began to stir, their alien eyes tracking the trio with an unnatural intent. The line between creator and monster, Darcy realized, had never felt thinner. As they left the department, the hum of machinery seemed like a chorus of serpents. Miss Bennet glanced at Darcy, who did not meet her gaze. Whitmore, striding ahead, whistled a tune that might have been a lullaby or a war song. The future they had glimpsed was no longer a question of if humanity would change, but by whose hand. As they entered the next lab, a panoramic screen illuminated the room, displaying a swirling hologram of a virus, its geometric structure pulsing with an eerie blue glow. This, Whitmore began, his voice taut with exhilaration, is Viragen 9A, bioengineered vector, unlike anything conceived before. He gestured to the hologram. It's not a virus in the traditional sense. We've stripped it of all pathogenicity, repurposed its delivery mechanism with CRISPR-X, and embedded it with synthetic messenger RNA. Once introduced into the body, it infiltrates every cell, rewriting DNA sequences at a systemic level. Permanent change, effortless, holistic. Miss Bennet's eyebrows lifted. Rewriting an entire genome? The implications for hereditary diseases are profound, but isn't there a risk of off-target mutations? Even with precision tools, cellular variability could lead to unintended consequences. Whitmore's smirk was both admiring and condescending. A valid concern, Miss Bennet, but Viragen 9 employs quantum dots as real-time regulators, adjusting edits based on cellular feedback. We've tested it in 12 human trials. Each subject exhibited full phenotypic transformation, elimination of genetic disorders, enhanced immune responses, even metabolic optimizations. One trial subject, a 45-year-old with Huntington's, is now vividly playing parkour at his local gym. Darcy, ever the strategist, crossed his arms. A gym or a controlled environment for further observation? His gaze flicked to a secured glass chamber at the lab's far end, where a young woman lay sleeping, her body connected to monitors. Is that a trial subject? Whitmore's eyes gleamed. Subject 13, our first to volunteer for the next phase. Voluntary human augmentation. With her consent, we've modified her mitochondrial DNA to enhance ATP efficiency. She'll experience increased stamina, accelerated healing, a glimpse into the future of human potential. Miss Bennet stepped closer to the glass, her reflection overlapping with the sleeping woman. And if the body rejects the changes, or if the virus integrates into germ cells, you're not just altering one individual, you could be engineering lineage. Silence hung like a biohazard alert. Whitmore's enthusiasm dimmed, but only slightly. We've mitigated those risks. Germ cell integration is prevented by epigenetic locks. As for rejection, he tapped his temple. That's what our predictive AI is for. Viragen 9 is safe. Revolutionary. Darcy exchanged a glance with Miss Bennet, his sharp mind calculating partnerships, patents, and peril. Revolutionary, yes, but also disruptive. Imagine the regulatory hurdles, the ethical ones. His voice softened, yet carried weight. Pemberley Corp has always prioritized technologies that elevate humanity without compromising its essence. This borders on redefining what it means to be human. Whitmore's smile hardened. Is that not the height of elevation? To transcend our biological limitations? You're here because you see the future, Mr. Darcy. Viragen 9 isn't just a tool. It's an evolutionary bridge. Miss Bennet turned back to her companion. A bridge with no guardrails. Chapter 7. The glass of the observation dome stretched from floor to the ceiling. A flawless pane that seemed to swallow the world outside and hold it in a silent, unblinking stare. Inside, the air was cool and scented with antiseptic, the hum of climate control systems a low, steady thrum. The white tiles of the floor reflected a wash of soft white light, and a single line of steel-reinforced doors led to the laboratory beyond. Dr. Alden Whitmore stood at the edge of the glass, his white coat immaculate, his hair clipped short in a disciplined, almost military fashion. He turned his gaze to the two figures waiting beside him. Mr. Darcy, Miss Bennet, Whitmore said, his voice reverberating slightly in the high-ceiling room. What you are about to witness is the culmination of 5 years of research, a breakthrough in somatic epigenetic editing. May I present you the results of rewriting the functional genome of an adult in situ, reconfiguring neural pathways, metabolic rates, and, most crucially, the adaptive response to environmental stressors. He gestured toward the glass, and the three of them turned to see a group of people standing behind a massive, floor-to-ceiling window that separated the observers from the test subjects. The subjects were seated on low stools, their bodies slender, their skin an almost luminous pallor that caught the light like polished stone. Their clothing was simple, a drab, utilitarian gray. Nothing to distract from the strange, quiet tension that seemed to vibrate around them. Darcy inclined his head, his expression a mixture of curiosity and the polite reserve of a man accustomed to making deals rather than witnessing miracles. Miss Bennet, however, let a flicker of unease pass across her features before she forced it back into the measured composure of a senior executive. The first thing Miss Bennet noticed was their eyes. They were human in shape, set in the same proportionate sockets as any unaltered adult. But the irises were dull, as if the pigment that normally gave them depth had been leached away. The pupils were wide, unblinking, but there was an unmistakable hollowness, an emptiness that seemed to swallow any hint of the world beyond the glass. It was as though the very capacity for wonder, for curiosity, had been removed, leaving behind a vessel of raw, unreflective awareness. Whitmore observed her reaction with a tight smile. You're seeing the result of targeted suppression of the limbic system's emotional resonance. The virus disables the circuitry that we associate with empathy and spontaneous affect, leaving a purely analytical, data-driven cognition. She pressed her palm lightly against the glass as if trying to feel the barrier, and leaned forward. So they can think, but they cannot feel? Exactly, Whitmore replied. The Helix virus rewires the neurochemical pathways that generate effective responses. The subjects retain memory, retain logical processing, but they're stripped of the noise of emotion. The result is a heightened capacity for precision, and ideal for high-stakes decision-making, where fear, love, or grief would otherwise cloud judgment. At the edge of the glass, a flicker of motion caught Miss Bennet's eye. A man, perhaps in his early 30s, had turned his head toward the observers. His gaze, though still as empty as before, seemed to sharpen, as if a sensor had registered the sudden influx of visual data. The subject's eyes widened fractionally, then narrowed. His shoulders stiffened. The other subjects followed, their heads turning in perfect unison, as if they shared a single, invisible nervous system. For a moment, the whole room seemed to hold its breath, the quiet hum of the ventilation system the only sound. "Notice the response latency," Whitmore whispered, his voice barely audible. "Even without effective processing, the neural circuits detect visual stimuli. It's a reflex, an instinctual alert." The subjects began to move toward the glass. Their steps were deliberate, measured, each footfall a soft thump against the sterile floor. As they approached, Miss Bennet's hand tightened on the pane. She felt in the deep places of her gut, a place that had never been stripped away, an instinctive alarm that rose higher than any rational analysis could explain. Then as the nearest subject reached the glass, something changed. His stare locked onto her face, and in that instant, a glint, brief, almost imperceptible, flashed across his pupils, an echo of something older than DNA, older than any virus. It was not fear, but an intensity of reaction that no synthetic editing could erase. He recoiled in an instant, as though the observation had ignited a buried terror. The rest of the group followed suit, their bodies pulling back with a synchronized fluidity, like a flock of birds startled by a sudden hawk. They fled toward the farthest corner of the observation chamber, where a darkened alcove lay shrouded in shadow. "There!" They pressed their backs against the wall, their heads turned toward Miss Bennet. Their eyes, still empty of color, now seemed to burn with something else entirely. Hatred. It was not the warm human hatred that is born of jealousy or rivalry, but a cold, raw opposition to the very act of being seen, a hatred that had been buried beneath layers of engineered detachment and re-emerged in a moment of exposure. Miss Bennet felt a prickle travel up her spine. The emptiness she had seen was not a vacuum, but a pressure, a compressed force waiting to explode when the thin veneer of control was breached. She realized that Whitmore's promise of dispassionate efficiency had a hidden cost, the removal of the very filters that keep humanity from self-destruction. A cold wind seemed to sweep across the glass, though the climate control was set to a constant 21 degrees Celsius. The shadows in the corner deepened, the eyes of the altered humans glinting like distant stars caught in a black void. Miss Bennet felt a strange resolve settle within her, a mixture of dread and duty. She lifted her hand from the glass, her fingers trembling. "We will not release them into the market," she said quietly, more to herself than to anyone else. "Not until we understand the price of a mind without a heart." Darcy nodded. "And we must ensure that whatever we create does not become a weapon against the very people who birthed it." Whitmore looked at his two visitors, then at the glass, then back again. He understood that the promise of Helix Innovations had been a promise of power, a power that, when wielded without humility, could open a fissure in the very definition of humanity. The room fell silent. Beyond the glass, the modified humans watched, their expressionless faces turned toward Miss Bennet, their eyes alight with an emotion that could only be described as a resurrected, cold hatred, an echo of the human spirit that no virus could ever truly erase. In that moment, the empty look was no longer empty. It was a mirror, reflecting a future that hung on a thin line between scientific triumph and ethical ruin. And as the three executives stepped away from the glass, the world outside the dome seemed suddenly more fragile, the sky beyond the steel walls a little dimmer, the promise of progress fraught with a new, unsettling reverence. The virus had given them a glimpse of what could be, an existence devoid of love, yet not devoid of fury. Chapter 8. The helicopter blades whirred like a restless hymn as it sliced through the twilight sky, the amber glow of Pemberley Corp's glass towers growing faintly visible in the distance. Inside the cramped cabin, Mr. Darcy sat rigid in his seat, fingers drumming against the armrest, while Miss Elizabeth Bennet stared out the window, her reflection merging with the streaking clouds. "They're not people," Elizabeth said abruptly, her voice taut. She turned from the window, her brow furrowed. "They're close, but something's wrong. It's as though their souls have been hollowed out." Darcy exhaled, his jaw tightening. "Dr. Whitmore insists the neurological integration is a temporary setback, a calibration error, nothing more." He hesitated, then met her gaze, though he couldn't explain why they fled from you, or why their eyes burned with hatred. Elizabeth shuddered, as if recalling a nightmare. At Helix, she'd encountered the modified beings, humanoid, eerily so, with lifelike skin and eyes like shards of obsidian. They'd stood motionless at first, observing, then recoiled when she reached out, their faces twisting into masks of visceral loathing. One had even slammed its skull against a lab table before the guards could restrain it. "They didn't want to be studied," she whispered. "They wanted to destroy." Darcy leaned forward, the vial catching his eye. "And yet, they're supposed to be devoid of emotion. Whitmore's team claims the DNA modifications suppress primal instincts, aggression, fear, even love. That's why the trial failed. The subjects became automata." He paused, his voice dropping. "Except for you, they fixated on you as if you were a threat." Elizabeth's lips pressed into a line. "Maybe they know something we don't." She glanced at him, her eyes sharp. "You've seen their files? The temporary setback has been in every trial. How many iterations have they done? A dozen? 100? Darcy didn't answer. The silence stretched, broken only by the helicopter's hum. Outside, the first drops of rain peppered the glass, mirroring the storm in Elizabeth's mind. She thought back to the lab's security footage, the modified beings, designated hybrids, moving with a jerky, insect-like precision. Their faces so human, so wrong. A scientist had described them as works in progress, but Elizabeth had seen the fear in their eyes. Not of her, but through her, as if she were a herald of something worse. "What if the problem isn't in their DNA?" she said suddenly. "What if it's in their minds? Whitmore said you can't force a brain to feel what it's not wired for, but maybe you can make it remember what it's been stripped of." Darcy's gaze sharpened. "You think they're reacting to you because you're a trigger?" "I don't know, but hate that violent. It doesn't come from nothing." She traced the helicopter's window seam with her fingertip. "Did Whitmore mention any psychological studies? Any precedent for that kind of reaction?" "No." Darcy's voice was grim. "He said it was unprecedented, which makes me wonder why you, of all people..." The helicopter lurched as turbulence hit, cutting him off. Elizabeth steadied herself against the seat, her pulse quickening. For a moment she could have sworn she saw one of the hybrids in the glass, its face pressed to the other side of the cabin, eyes blazing. She blinked, and it was gone. Darcy watched her, a flicker of alarm in his eyes. "You're not imagining things, are you?" "I'm imagining them for the first time," she said softly. "They're trapped, Fitzwilliam, and I think they know it. Maybe they hate me because I'm different." He opened his mouth to respond, but his phone buzzed. A silent alert from Pemberley. Elizabeth didn't need to see it to know what it was. Helix had released more data, or worse, another sample. As the helicopter descended toward the corporate spire, its lights piercing the storm, Elizabeth wondered if the hybrid's hatred was for her or for the world that she represented. Chapter 9. As Mr. Darcy sat in his office at Pemberley Corp, he couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in the pit of his stomach since their visit to Helix Innovations with Miss Bennet. She had explained her findings, her voice laced with a mixture of concern and caution, as if she anticipated that he might not agree with her assessment. The memory of her words lingered in his mind. "It's not the first time that humanity has attempted to contaminate human DNA with foreign genes, Mr. Darcy. In fact, the Old Testament speaks of a similar incident, where beings of extraordinary size and strength were created, but they were devoid of conscience and moral fiber. She had paused, collecting her thoughts before continuing. These beings, known as the Nephilim, were the product of human and other DNA, and they wreaked havoc on humanity, leading to an era of violence and chaos. Mr. Darcy's eyes narrowed as he recalled the biblical account of the Nephilim. It was a story he had heard before, but never in the context of genetic engineering. The idea that humanity had attempted to play God, to create beings superior to themselves, and had failed miserably, sent a shiver down his spine. Miss Bennet's words continued to echo in his mind. The Nephilim, they didn't just disappear, Mr. Darcy. They continued to breed with humans, contaminating the gene pool, until nearly all of humanity was affected. It was only through the Great Flood that God was able to restore the natural order, saving those who were still untainted by the foreign DNA. As he sat at his desk, surrounded by the trappings of modern technology and innovation, Mr. Darcy couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation. Were they, at Pemberley Corp and Helix Innovations, following in the footsteps of those ancient civilizations, attempting to create something that was beyond their control? The thought sent a chill down his spine. He rose from his chair, walking over to the window, where he gazed out at the city below. The towering skyscrapers and bustling streets seemed to stretch on forever, a testament to human ingenuity and progress. But at what cost, he wondered? Were they sacrificing their humanity, their very souls, in the pursuit of scientific advancement? Mr. Darcy's thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was his assistant, with a look of concern etched on her face. "Sir, we've received a message from Helix Innovations. They're requesting a meeting to discuss the implications of their research." "Mr." Darcy's eyes narrowed, his mind racing with the possibilities. He knew that he had to attend the meeting, to understand the full extent of what they were dealing with. But he also knew that he had to be cautious, to consider the potential consequences of their actions. "Schedule the meeting," he said finally, his voice firm and resolute. "I will attend, and I will make sure that we proceed with caution and with a clear understanding of the risks involved." As his assistant nodded and departed, Mr. Darcy couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. They were playing with fire, and he wasn't sure if they would be able to control the flames. But he was determined to try, to ensure that they didn't repeat the mistakes of the past, and that they didn't sacrifice their humanity in the pursuit of scientific progress. Chapter 10. The next day, Mr. Darcy, the president of Pemberley Corp, sat behind his large oak desk, his eyes fixed on the woman standing before him. Miss Bennet, his vice president, stood confidently, her expression a mask of professionalism. He had invited her to his office to discuss their visit to Helix Innovations, a cutting-edge biotech firm that had been making waves in the scientific community. "Miss Bennet, I wanted to touch base with you about our meeting with the team at Helix Innovations," Mr. Darcy said, his deep voice low and even. "I must say I was quite impressed with their research on human DNA modification." Miss Bennet nodded, her eyes sparkling with interest. "Yes, sir. Their technology is indeed revolutionary, but I must admit I had some reservations about the implications of their research." "Mr." Darcy raised an eyebrow. "Oh, what kind of reservations?" Miss Bennet took a deep breath before speaking. "Well, sir, when I heard about the dedicated virus that can modify the DNA of the entire human body, I couldn't help but think of the biblical prophecy of the mark of the beast." Mr. Darcy's expression changed from curiosity to surprise. "The mark of the beast? I'm not sure I follow the connection." Miss Bennet's voice was steady. "According to the Bible, the mark of the beast is a sign that will be imposed on humanity, changing people from the inside out. It's said to take away their conscience, their free will, and ultimately their ability to receive salvation. When I heard about the virus, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the fulfillment of that prophecy." The room fell silent as Mr. Darcy digested Miss Bennet's words. He had always known her to be a devout Christian, but he had never expected her to make such a connection. As a man of science, he had always approached problems with a rational mind, but Miss Bennet's words had struck a chord within him. "I see," he said finally, his voice measured. "I must admit, I hadn't considered the biblical implications of this technology. But do you really think that's what's at play here? Miss Bennet hesitated before speaking. I don't know, sir, but I do know that as Christians, we have a responsibility to be vigilant and to consider the moral implications of our actions. If this technology has the potential to alter humanity in such a fundamental way, we need to be careful about how we proceed. Mr. Darcy nodded, his mind racing with the implications. He had always prided himself on being a forward-thinking entrepreneur, but Miss Bennet's words had given him pause. Perhaps, he thought, it was time to reconsider the ethics of their involvement with Helix Innovations. Do you understand why they turned away from us, Elizabeth? Darcy asked, his voice low, resonant against the steel floor. He turned his gaze from the rain-dappled skyline to the woman beside him. Why those beings, having modified DNA, fled your presence and harbored hatred for you? Elizabeth's eyes, usually as bright as a fresh spring morning, dimmed for a heartbeat before she answered. Those beings, sir, she said, the tone measured and quiet, are missing conscience and moral. In their altered state, they are pliable, surrendering to the power that commands them. They were handed over to evil, sir. Not by choice, but by the very nature of their engineered fragility. She paused, the words hanging in the air like a prayer. She lifted her hand, fingers lightly brushing the glass as if feeling the rain beyond it. I have received God's salvation, a mercy that they can never attain. That salvation is not encoded in their DNA, nor can it be manufactured in any lab. It is a grace that shields my soul, that provides an anchor against the abyss they have been thrust into. For them, the knowledge that I possess something they cannot, something eternal, has become a source of fear and hatred. The rain seemed to surge louder, as if echoing her confession. Darcy listened, his mind turning like a clock gear, each tooth meshing with the next, as he tried to reconcile the cold clinical data of Helix with the warmth of an ancient faith that lingered in Elizabeth's words. Thank you, Miss Bennet, he said finally. You've given me a lot to think about. I think we need to take a closer look at the potential consequences of this technology and consider whether it aligns with our company values. Miss Bennet smiled, a look of relief washing over her face. I'm glad you're taking this seriously, sir. I believe it's our duty to proceed with caution and to prioritize the well-being of humanity above all else. As the meeting drew to a close, Mr. Darcy couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration for his vice president. Her courage in speaking out and her commitment to her faith were traits that he valued highly. Together, they would navigate the complex world of biotechnology, guided by a sense of morality and a deep respect for the human condition. Chapter 11. Mr. Darcy, president of Pemberley Corp, settled into his plush office chair and connected with his vice president, Miss Bennet, via video call. The screen flickered to life, and Miss Bennet's bright smile filled the frame. Good morning, Miss Bennet, Mr. Darcy said, his deep voice warm and professional. I hope you're doing well. I wanted to personally reach out and express my appreciation for your insightful views on the evaluation of the research in Helix Innovations. Your perspective was invaluable, and I'm grateful to have you on our team. Miss Bennet's smile widened, and she leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with interest. Thank you, Mr. Darcy. I'm glad I could contribute to the discussion. It's an exciting project, but there are some moral issues like you know. As they chatted, Mr. Darcy found himself feeling more at ease than he usually did during business calls. There was something about Miss Bennet's warm demeanor that put him at ease, and he found himself wanting to know more about her beyond their professional relationship. Miss Bennet, if I may ask, he said, his tone a little more casual, what do you like to do outside of work? I've noticed you often mention your Bible group in passing, and I'm curious to know more about it. Miss Bennet's expression turned thoughtful, and she leaned back in her chair. Ah, yes. My Bible group is a very important part of my life. We meet regularly to read and discuss Bible passages, and then we pray together. It's a wonderful way to connect with like-minded people and grow in our faith. Mr. Darcy's curiosity was piqued. He had never been particularly religious, but there was something about Miss Bennet's description that resonated with him. That sounds fascinating, he said, his interest genuine. "I'd love to learn more about it. Would it be possible for me to observe, perhaps, one of your meetings?" Miss Bennet's face lit up with a warm smile. "Actually, we're meeting tonight at 8 p.m., and you're more than welcome to join us. We meet via video call, just like this, so it's easy to participate from anywhere." Mr. Darcy was taken aback by the invitation, but he found himself wanting to accept. There was something about Miss Bennet's Bible group that drew him in, and he was eager to experience it for himself. "I'd like that," he said, his voice a little softer than usual. "Thank you for inviting me, Miss Bennet. I'll make sure to join the call at 8 p.m. tonight." As they wrapped up their conversation and ended the call, Mr. Darcy couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. He had no idea what to expect from Miss Bennet's Bible group, but he was eager to learn more about this aspect of her life. And as he sat back in his chair, he couldn't shake the feeling that this might be the start of something new and unexpected, a connection that went beyond the boardroom and into the realm of the heart. Chapter 12. It was a typical Wednesday evening for the Bible group, gathering virtually from the comfort of their own homes to discuss and reflect on their faith. Miss Bennet, a regular attendee and friend to many in the group, smiled warmly as she introduced a special guest. "Good evening, everyone," she began. "I'd like to introduce Mr. Darcy, the president of Pemberley Corp, where I work. He's interested in learning more about our Bible group and has kindly joined us tonight." The group welcomed Mr. Darcy with a chorus of greetings and hellos. He nodded graciously, his reserved demeanor a slight contrast to the warm and lively atmosphere of the group. "Thank you for having me," Mr. Darcy said, his deep voice filling the virtual space. "I must admit, I'm intrigued by the idea of a Bible group and the discussions that take place here. As the president of Pemberley Corp, I'm always looking for ways to stay grounded and informed, especially when it comes to the moral implications of our work." Miss Bennet added, "Mr. Darcy's company is at the forefront of technical research, and they're doing some amazing things. But as he'll explain, they've encountered some challenges that have raised important questions about ethics and morality." Mr. Darcy nodded, his expression turning thoughtful. "Yes, that's correct. We've been working on several high-profile projects, pushing the boundaries of innovation and technology. However, as we delve deeper into these projects, we've begun to encounter some difficult moral dilemmas. Questions about the potential consequences of our research, the impact on society, and the responsibility that comes with creating new technologies have arisen." The group fell into a thoughtful silence, each member reflecting on the complexities of Mr. Darcy's words. After a moment, Miss Bennet spoke up. "I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to explore the intersection of faith and technology. As Christians, we're called to be good stewards of the gifts and talents we've been given. How can we use our knowledge and expertise to create positive change, while also being mindful of the potential consequences of our actions?" The leader, a wise and compassionate man named John, smiled warmly as he expressed the topic for the evening: the relationship between humanity's desire for research and innovation and their faith in God. John started by quoting Ecclesiastes 1:13, "And I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven." He explained that God had indeed instilled in mankind a strong desire to explore, discover, and push the boundaries of knowledge. This drive was not inherently bad, John emphasized, but rather a natural part of being human. However, problems arose when people began to believe that they could replace God's work, or even God himself, with their own accomplishments. John's expression turned serious as he continued, "We start to think that we can outdo God, that our technology and innovations can surpass his creation." He then quoted Isaiah 2:8, "Their land is filled with idols. They bow down to the work of their hands, to what their fingers have made." In the Old Testament, John explained, the Israelites had fallen into the trap of creating their own gods, worshiping the works of their own hands. They had forgotten that true power and wisdom came from God, not from their own creations. Today, John argued, the same pattern was repeating itself. Many people believed that they could improve upon God's work, or even replace him through their technological advancements. But this is a doomed endeavor, John warned. We are trying to play God, to usurp his authority and wisdom. And it will lead to catastrophe. He paused, surveying the group with a solemn gaze. We have lost sight of what is truly good and pure. We have become so artificial, so disconnected from the natural world and from God's original design. And that, John then turned to Genesis chapter 1, where the creation story is told. Over and over again it says that what God made is good, he emphasized. The earth, the sea, the sun, the moon, all of it is good. And humanity, created in God's image, is also good. But John noted humanity had strayed far from that original state. We have polluted the earth, destroyed ecosystems, and harmed each other. We have forgotten what it means to live in harmony with creation and with God. The group fell silent, reflecting on John's words. One member, Sarah, spoke up. But what can we do? How can we return to that original state? John smiled, his eyes twinkling. That's the beautiful part. We can't do it on our own, but we can surrender to God's plan. We can acknowledge our limitations and our sins and ask for his forgiveness and guidance. The group launched into a lively discussion, sharing their thoughts and insights on the matter. Mr. Darcy listened intently, his expression thoughtful and engaged. Before their prayer time, John left the group with a final thought. Let us strive to remember that God's creation is good, and that our best efforts should be focused on preserving and honoring that goodness, rather than trying to replace it with our own creations. The group members nodded in agreement, each one feeling a sense of conviction and purpose. As they signed off, they carried with them a renewed sense of awe and respect for God's work, and a commitment to living in harmony with his creation. As the evening drew to a close, he thanked the group for their input and perspectives. I must say I found this discussion to be incredibly valuable, Mr. Darcy said. Your insights have given me much to consider, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to engage with such a thoughtful and compassionate group of people. I look forward to continuing this conversation and exploring ways to integrate our faith and values into the work we do at Pemberley Corp. As the video call came to a close, the group members smiled and bid each other farewell, feeling grateful for the unexpected opportunity to share their faith and values with Mr. Darcy and the team at Pemberley Corp. Chapter 13. The next morning, Mr. Darcy, the president of Pemberley Corp, was sipping his coffee and checking his emails when his phone rang. He answered it, expecting it to be one of his colleagues or perhaps a business partner. But to his surprise, it was Dr. Alden Whitmore from Helix Innovations, a leading research center that Pemberley Corp had invested in. Mr. Darcy, I'm afraid we have an emergency situation on our hands, Dr. Whitmore said, his voice laced with urgency. I need you to come to Helix Innovations immediately. We require your presence to make some critical decisions. Mr. Darcy's curiosity was piqued. What's happened, Dr. Whitmore? He asked, setting his coffee cup down. There was a pause on the other end of the line before Dr. Whitmore responded. It's the mutants, Mr. Darcy. The humans with modified DNA that we've been working with. They've rebelled and taken over the entire building. They've thrown all our personnel out and are now using our resources for their own purposes. Mr. Darcy's mind was racing. He had invested heavily in Helix Innovations, and the thought of the research center being taken over by a group of rogue mutants was unsettling. What kind of resources are they using? He asked, trying to assess the situation. They're using our labs, equipment, and supplies, Dr. Whitmore replied. They're also accessing our databases and using our technology to enhance their own abilities. We're not sure what their ultimate goal is, but we need to act quickly to prevent any further damage. Mr. Darcy knew that he had to act fast. He couldn't let a group of rogue mutants compromise the research and investments that Pemberley Corp had made. I'll be right there, Dr. Whitmore, he said, already heading out the door. Let's work together to resolve this situation and restore order to Helix Innovations. As he arrived at the research center with his vice president, Miss Bennet, Mr. Darcy could see that the building had been taken by a group of heavily armed mutants. Mr. Darcy's heart sank as he realized the gravity of the situation. He knew that he had a tough road ahead of him, but he was determined to resolve the crisis and protect the interests of Pemberley Corp. Outside the Helix Innovations research facility, Dr. Whitmore stand, holding a remote control, connected to the closed control center of the building, offering a connection through which they could monitor the whole building. Through the fogged pane, the mutants could be seen, twisted forms of humanity by experimental DNA modification. They had barricaded the entrances, howling in voices that were half human, half bestial. The air inside the conference room felt heavier, as though the weight of the decision ahead pressed against the walls themselves. Dr. Alden Whitmore paced like a caged animal, his silver-rimmed glasses catching the flicker of the holographic projections, displaying the mutants' encroachment. "We're out of time," he said, his voice taut. He turned to face the two visitors seated at the oval table. Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy, the research facility's principal investor, and Miss Elizabeth Bennet, his companion whose sharp eyes missed nothing. Mr. Darcy, tall and composed, exhaled through his nose. "And your plan, Dr. Whitmore?" The scientist paused, the words like a bitter pill. "We set charges on the entrance pylons and detonate. The shockwave seals the breaches and resets the facility's integrity. But it means everything. Data, prototypes, the quantum genome database, gone." He gestured helplessly at the projections. "We'd start over with nothing." Elizabeth, who had been listening in quiet, closed her eyes, apparently for a prayer. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. When she opened them, their hazel depths were steely with resolve. "What kind of fire suppression system do these rooms have?" she asked, her voice calm but insistent. Whitmore blinked, thrown by the sudden shift in direction. "Carbon dioxide, actually. Old school, from the facility's original design. Each lab has a standalone unit, triggered manually or via the central console. It floods the room with CO2, knocking out a system without damaging equipment." Something sparked in his expression. "Wait, of course. The mutants are still human, albeit aberrant. Their biology might respond to the same thing a clogged boiler room does. Asphyxiation. If we route the gas now before they reach the core, it'd be like putting them to sleep. No pain, no explosion." His voice grew feverish with the urgency of revelation. "The system's fully remote. We could purge the entire lower wing in under 2 minutes." Darcy leaned forward, his hands steepled. "And if they survive?" Whitmore shook his head. "CO2 levels would have to reach 30% concentration. At that point, even these modifications can't override oxygen deprivation. They won't." A pause. "They won't survive." Elizabeth's jaw tightened. "A mercy killing, then." Darcy's gaze settled on her, searching. In the end, he gave a slow nod. "Do it." Whitmore's fingers danced over the console. The hum of the facility shifted as the fire suppression protocol engaged. A soft whoosh emanated from the vents embedded in the ceiling, barely perceptible. Through the windows, the mutants at the barricades faltered, first rubbing their eyes, then stumbling, as drowsiness overtook their feral rage. Within moments, the thrashing mass collapsed into stillness, snow on a frozen lake. The next 48 hours were a blur of verification and salvage. Sensors confirmed 0 oxygen levels in the lower wing. Autopsies on the recovered mutants would later be labeled inconclusive, their cellular structures scrambled by unstable DNA, unable to withstand the gas's influence. The research was preserved, though the cost weighed heavily on the team. Elizabeth visited the observation deck alone. The mutants' bodies, encased in body bags, were being loaded onto a disposal convoy. She touched the glass, her reflection merging with the sight. Mercy, she thought, is not always a pretty thing. Back in the control room, Whitmore sighed as he reinitialized the system. "Next time we install a better solution, maybe lasers, or something less moral." Darcy, standing beside him, fixed his eyes on Elizabeth's silhouette beyond the window. "Moral," he murmured. "You mean human?" "She'd have you use a scalpel, Alden, not a sledgehammer." Somewhere in the cold storage vault, a single data crystal hummed softly, containing a decade of dreams, and the ghosts of choices made in the name of progress. Chapter 14. The fluorescent lights of Pemberley Corp's executive conference room hummed faintly, casting a sterile glow over the tables strewn with reports and coffee cups. Dr. Alden Whitmore, his silver-framed glasses askew and tie slightly loosened, slumped in his chair. His usual vigor was gone, replaced by the gaunt exhaustion of a man who'd spent sleepless nights untangling a web of ethical and scientific disaster. Aunt Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy, the company's president, sat across from him, his posture rigid, fingers steepled. Beside him, Miss Elizabeth Bennet, Pemberley's vice president, leaned forward, her expression a mix of concern and quiet resolve. The room felt charged, as if the walls themselves held their breath. "We've all seen what Helix left in their wake," Dr. Whitmore began, his voice frayed. He slid a dossier toward the center of the table. Its cover bore the scarlet warning label, classified, unauthorized, use prohibited. Our DNA modification trials weren't just reckless. They were fraudulent, inserting foreign sequences into healthy genomes. It wasn't innovation, it was alchemy, and it ended in catastrophe. A hollow laugh escaped him. Miss Bennet exhaled softly, her fingers brushing the edges of a case file. She glanced at Darcy, whose face remained impassive. "If we abandon this line of research altogether," she interjected, "we risk letting others take the reins. Helix's collapse has already drawn the attention of competitors, some with far fewer scruples." Dr. Whitmore's shoulders slumped. "And if we keep it, how do we ensure we're not the next cautionary tale?" Darcy spoke, his voice a quiet anchor. "We redefine the mission. Helix's mistake wasn't the technology. It was the intent they chased enhancement. Vanity, strength, intelligence. But we pivot to correction. Repair what's broken. The patents we hold on CRX-79 and the delivery vectors, they're not just legal assets. They're a responsibility." He met Whitmore's weary eyes. "We control the narrative. We ensure these tools serve patients with needs, not desires." Miss Bennet folded her hands, considering. "The regulatory bodies will be watching. If we frame this as a humanitarian initiative, we'll need transparency," Whitmore finished, a flicker of his old fire returning. "No black box algorithms, no backroom deals. The moment we prioritize profit over people, we've become Helix." Darcy nodded. "Agreed. We publish our clinical frameworks, invite third-party audits, and partner with hospitals for no-cost pilot trials." He tapped the dossier. "The science isn't evil. A child born with a metabolic disorder deserves a cure. There are so many people suffering because of DNA defects. A soldier's sibling, a farmer's daughter. No one should carry a birth certificate like a death sentence." For a long moment, the room lingered in contemplation, the weight of legacy and ambition pressing upon them. Then Miss Bennet stood, her chair scraping softly against the tile. "I'll draft the compliance protocols by this afternoon. Dr. Whitmore, I'll need your input on the patient selection criteria." The scientist allowed a wry smile. "I'll pore over those criteria myself. No shortcuts." As they dispersed, Darcy lingered by the window, watching the sun rise over the city. The path ahead remained fraught, but in the decision to wield science as a scalpel, not a cudgel, he glimpsed a future where Pemberley's legacy would be one of redemption, not just profit. Epilogue. 10 months later, Pemberley's founder, still a man of formidable tradition, had made a habit of joining the weekly stream, his polished navy suit a silent testimony to the marriage of professionalism and piety he so often preached. Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy, president of Pemberley, entered the small, square-frame window that served as his avatar, his eyes briefly scanning the grid of smiling faces. On his left, a framed portrait of headquarters of Pemberley Corp glimmered in the soft office light. On his right, a well-worn copy of Psalm 127 lay open at the verse he had quoted the night before. "Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain." It was more than a motto. It was the creed that guided every quarterly report, every product launch, and, tonight, every word he was about to speak. The video feed was a familiar mosaic of colleagues and community members. The modest accountant from the bookkeeping department, the teenage son of a longtime client who had been invited for his mother's encouragement, a couple of retirees who attended for the fellowship, not only the networking. And there, in the middle row, the face that had been almost as permanent as the corporate logo, Miss Elizabeth Bennet, his vice president, her dark curls pulled back in a practical bun, a thin silver chain bearing a tiny cross catching the light. She smiled, and the screen seemed to straighten a little, as if the world itself were aligning. For a moment, Darcy's mind drifted back to the first Wednesday he had joined the call. He remembered the way the group's leader, John, had spoken about the relationship between humanity's desire for research and innovation and their faith in God. He had laughed, a soft, restrained sound that went unnoticed over the digital hum, but it had been the first time a seed of genuine curiosity had taken root in his otherwise rigorously logical heart. Now, after months of whispered conversations over coffee, strategy sessions that ran late into the night, and an unexpected gentle hand on his shoulder during a presentation on corporate social responsibility, he found himself standing at the precipice of a different kind of partnership, one that would take him beyond spreadsheets and boardrooms. A quick glance at the chat window revealed a flurry of emojis. The participants were already sending the traditional blessings that accompanied any good news shared in the group. Darcy took a breath and let the words form, his voice steady but not without the faint tremor of excitement. "Good evening, dear friends," he began. "I am humbled each week to sit amongst you, to hear the wisdom of Scripture and the stories of our lives intertwining. In the spirit of the passage we reflect upon tonight, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. I wish to share with you the foundation of a new house I am building in my own life." A pause, respectful, as the screen held his earnest expression. The chat erupted and, "Tell us more," flickering between the blue and gray bubbles. "It has been my privilege and joy to work alongside Elizabeth these past 12 months," Darcy continued, his eyes finding hers through the pixelated window. "From board meetings to brainstorming sessions, we have learned what it means to truly cooperate, to listen, to challenge, to uplift. In doing so, we discovered that the partnership we had cultivated in the office was merely a reflection of a deeper bond that has grown in our hearts." Elizabeth's cheeks, barely visible behind the digital veil, warmed with a faint rose. She nodded, a small, graceful motion that sent a ripple through the group's collective attention. "Indeed," she said, her voice melodic and confident. "When we first discussed the potential for collaboration, I never imagined that the work we would do together would lead us here. In the quiet moments after our meetings, in the prayers we whispered before the day began, we realized that the trust we placed in each other was a sacred trust, one that God had placed in our hands. It is with great joy and with the blessing of the Lord that I announce our betrothal. We have decided to marry in 6 weeks' time, and we would be honored if each of you, our cherished family in faith, would join us on our wedding day." A collective gasp rose from the grid, quickly followed by an outpouring of exclamation points, heart emojis, and a scrolling banner of "congratulations" that seemed to fill the screen with light. Sarah, whose screen was framed with a soft focus on the stained glass windows of her home chapel, let out a gentle laugh. "Oh, Fitzwilliam Elizabeth, you have truly built a house together, one that rests upon the very cornerstone of Christ's love. We will pray for you both, and we shall rejoice on your wedding day as a community." The chat fell into a rhythm of celebration. "Count us in," typed the teenage son. "Can't wait to see you dance." The retirees shared a meme of a wedding cake adorned with tiny corporate logos, and the accountant typed, "May your merger be blessed." In the moment that followed, Darcy glanced at Elizabeth, his mind racing with the implications of this public declaration. A few weeks earlier, he had been a man of reticence, his affection hidden behind corporate jargon and formal correspondence. Now, in front of a virtual congregation that had become a part of his spiritual scaffolding, he felt his heart, usually locked away like a vault, open to the world. "Elizabeth," he whispered, though his words traveled through pixels, "do you think we have prepared enough for the union of our lives, the joining of our families, the blending of our faith?" She met his gaze, her eyes bright with a calm certainty. "We have prayed, we have planned, and we have loved. The Lord's guidance has already begun to manifest in the people around us. We shall trust Him as we trust each other." As the call drew to a close, John raised her hand in a final blessing. May the Lord be the foundation of your marriage, as He is the foundation of our fellowship. May your love be a light in the halls of Pemberley Corp and beyond, and may all who witness your union be drawn closer to Him. The screen dimmed to black, and the soft digital hum faded. Darcy sat back in his chair, the hum of his office lights a comforting backdrop to the echo of prayer that lingered in his chest. He looked at the empty frame where Elizabeth's smile had been, and he felt for perhaps the first time in his life that the company he had been building was not merely a corporate edifice of glass and steel, but a sanctuary of love built on a covenant as ancient as the scriptures themselves. He rose, walked to the window, and gazed out at the city that twinkled beneath a canopy of midnight stars. In the distance, a lone church bell tolled, its resonant note carrying across rooftops and office towers alike, a reminder that time, faith, and love are intertwined. The video call that had started half a year ago as a modest gathering of believers would become, in a single night, the living testament to a promise kept, a partnership forged, and a love that would endure for generations.